If you heard knocking from the ground every night, how long would you wait before digging? The first night, I thought it was the pipes. You tell yourself things like that when you're in a new place. Creaks, taps, groans. It's an old house. They all make noise. But this wasn't a creak. It was a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, right beneath my bed. I froze. My body didn't move, but my mind started racing. I live alone. There's no one in the house. No basement. Just floorboards. And beneath that, dirt. I didn't check. Couldn't. Instead, I lay awake until sunlight crept through the curtains like a rescue. By morning, I had already convinced myself I imagined it. Lack of sleep. Stress. Just nerves. I just moved into this rental 2 days ago. Fresh start, they said. Quiet neighborhood. Good bones. Lena, the agent, kept calling it a hidden gem. She forgot to mention what was buried under the damn thing. That evening, I unpacked more boxes, trying to make it feel like mine. Family photos, a throw blanket, candles. I even played music. Loudly. Still, the silence that followed was heavier than I remembered. I went to bed just before midnight. And then it came again. Knock. 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 Exactly beneath me. Like someone was tapping the floor from underneath with the back of their hand. I sat up. My chest tightened. Pulse roaring in my ears. I whispered into the dark, "Hello." Nothing. I reached for my phone. The screen was black. Battery dead. I swear it was 70% just an hour ago. I stared at the floor. I didn't want to move. Didn't want to touch it. I imagined what was beneath the wooden boards. Dirt. Foundation. Maybe a crawl space. No basement. I had checked that when I toured it. So why did it feel like someone was under me? The knocks didn't repeat that night. But sleep didn't come either. By dawn, I had made a decision. If it happened again, I'd start looking. For answers. For a way out. Or for whatever was trying to get my attention from the ground below. The second night, I didn't sleep. I didn't even pretend. I sat upright in bed, heart clawing at my throat. My phone screen dimly glowing beside me. Battery at 42%. I kept checking it. Not for calls. Just to make sure it was still on. The house was dead quiet. And then I heard it again. Knock. 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 Not under my bed this time. This time, it came from the living room. I froze, mid-breath. I didn't move for maybe 30 seconds, maybe longer. The sound had shifted. That somehow made it worse. I stood slowly. My feet hit the wooden floor. Cold. Sharp. The kind of cold that makes you think of soil. I didn't know how I knew it, but somehow I could feel it. The knocking was coming from beneath the rug. From beneath the floor. From the earth. I stepped into the hallway. The air was heavier than before, thicker. Somehow. Like the oxygen had weight. My skin was damp and I hadn't broken a sweat. There was no heat coming from the vents. Just a still, breathless kind of chill. I didn't bother turning on the overhead lights. I didn't want to make anything feel more awake than it already was. As I stepped into the living room, the silence greeted me again. Sharp, unnatural. Like even the walls were holding their breath. I walked to the center of the room. My eyes locked on the old rug, curled at the edges like it had been peeled back before. That's where it came from. Right there. I didn't want to look underneath it, but I did. And there was nothing. Just scratched up floorboards. But then I realized they weren't just scratched. They were cracked. Thin, splintered lines running in jagged directions like lightning bolts. Something had hit the wood from below. And then I heard it again, softer this time. Tap, tap, tap. My body locked up. My knees nearly gave out. This was real. I wasn't tired. I wasn't stressed. I was standing in a room where something or someone was trying to get out. I backed away, holding my breath so tight my ribs ached. My voice caught in my throat, but I forced it out. Who's down there? Nothing. I asked again, louder. Still silence. But the silence wasn't empty. It felt listening. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen until sunrise, gripping a mug I never drank from, staring at the floor like it might breathe. By morning, I'd already talked myself out of it. Old house. No insulation. Animals. Maybe plumbing I didn't understand. I had an answer for everything, except the feeling. That feeling that someone had been buried beneath me. And they didn't want company. Can you really start over when you haven't dealt with what broke you? The truth is, I didn't rent this place because it was charming, or quiet, or full of character. Like the listing said, I rented it because I was tired of pretending I was okay. I had just lost someone. And when you lose someone the way I did, the silence doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like punishment. I didn't talk about it much, not even to my sister. I just packed up and left the city. I didn't want anyone asking questions. I didn't want to see my old apartment, my old friends, the old version of myself that used to believe life was stable. Because all it took was 6 seconds to unravel everything I thought I knew. That's how long it took from the phone vibrating in my hand to hearing the words, "We couldn't save him." My fiancé, Adam, had been hit by a truck on his way home. They said it was quick. But the quick part didn't matter. The permanent part did. I didn't cry when they told me. I didn't scream or collapse like in the movies. I just sat there, silent, staring at a wall I never noticed before. Grief isn't loud. Not at first. It's a stillness that buries itself inside you. The kind of silence that feels like it'll rot you from the inside out. That was 9 months ago. And now here I am, living in a stranger's house with something knocking from underneath me every night. I told myself I needed a reset. A place where nobody knew my name. Somewhere I could just exist without expectations. Heal in private. But I picked the wrong house. I know that now, because something about this place doesn't want peace. It feeds off discomfort. It listens when I breathe. It waits when I pause. And last night, after the knocking stopped, I could swear I heard a new sound. A shift. Like dirt moving. Like something trying to rise. And for the first time since Adam died, I felt something that wasn't sadness. I felt fear. Real, physical, bone-deep fear. The kind that makes your body prepare for things your mind can't accept. I haven't told anyone. Who would I tell? What would I say? Hi. I think the ground beneath my living room is alive? No, that's how you get labeled unstable. Fragile. The grieving woman who needs rest. But I'm not fragile. I'm alone. And whatever is buried beneath me knows it. Why would a house have a room no one wants to talk about? The third night, I didn't hear knocking. I waited for it, tensed up at the exact time it usually came. Midnight, then 1:04 a.m. Nothing. And in a way, that was worse. Because silence that's planned, silence that's intentional, doesn't feel like peace. Feels like stalking. Like something is watching you wait, testing your reaction. I spent that night sitting cross-legged in the living room, on top of that same rug, flashlight in one hand, crowbar in the other. I had found it in the garage earlier that day. Still had dirt on it. There was no basement, no crawl space. I had checked the lease. I had asked the agent. Just one story, a slab foundation, nothing unusual. But that's the thing. This house had too many blanks. No repair history, no permit records, no utility calls. For a home built in 1968, there should have been something, a water heater replacement, mold treatment, anything. When I brought it up to Lena, the real estate agent, she brushed it off. Some records get lost, she said, smiling like I was wasting her time. It's an old town. People keep things off paper. That stuck with me. People keep things off paper. I spent the afternoon at the library digging through property records. The address had changed once, about 10 years ago. Just one number difference. A clerical error, the librarian told me. But names? Owners? There was a gap. A 4-year period with no record of tenancy. Just a placeholder LLC with no contact info. That alone might not have raised alarms. But the librarian, a woman maybe in her 50s, sharp eyes behind tired glasses, leaned in as I was packing up. You renting there? She asked quietly. I nodded. She hesitated, then whispered. That place sat empty for a reason. She didn't elaborate. She just stood up and walked off like she'd already said too much. Back home, I pulled up the rug again. The cracks in the floorboards looked worse, like pressure had been building from beneath. That's when I noticed it. One floorboard, near the back corner of the room, looked replaced. Different nails, slightly raised, not as worn. I ran my fingers across it. It was loose. I wedged the crowbar underneath and pried. Creaked, groaned, and then lifted with a dull snap. And that's when I saw it. Not a hole, not a pipe, not a note. Hair. Just a few strands. Caught between the joists, half buried in the dust and dirt. Human. Dark. Still clinging to something I couldn't see. And didn't want to yet. My throat went dry. I backed away so fast I knocked over the lamp. That's when the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then silence again. I didn't touch the board after that. I didn't cover it up either. Because something inside me knew. Whatever was down there had felt me pull it open. People always say to trust your instincts. What they don't tell you is that once you do, once you let your gut start guiding you, you can't undo it. You can't go back to ignorance. You can't just pretend it was all in your head. Because now, you know something is wrong. And when you know that, you start looking. And once you start looking, you find things. That night, I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every creak in the house felt intentional. Every shadow on the wall looked too still. My body was exhausted, but my brain wouldn't let me rest. I sat on the floor with that crowbar still next to me. The board I had lifted earlier was still ajar, and I couldn't bring myself to close it. It felt like covering up a crime scene, like I'd be hiding something even from myself. But more than anything else, I needed proof. Something that would make this real to someone else. I set up the old GoPro I used for travel blogs. I had to dig through boxes to find it, and the battery was swollen from years of disuse, but it turned on. No night vision, no fancy lens, just a wide-angle shot trained on the center of my living room and that open floorboard. I hit record, left the room, locked myself in my bedroom, but didn't sleep. Just sat curled up against the door with a pillow and my phone. Around 1:07 a.m., I heard it again. Not knocking this time, dragging. A slow scrape like wood being pulled against concrete. Like something heavy being moved without urgency. I stayed frozen. Even if someone had broken in, what would I do? I was alone. I had no neighbors close enough to hear. And even if I called the police, what would I say? There's hair under my floor and the silence is following a schedule? I waited till morning. When the sun finally rose, I stepped out, barefoot, shaky. The air felt tense, like static. I walked into the living room and reached for the camera. The battery had died, but it recorded 47 minutes. I transferred the footage to my laptop, hands trembling. I didn't want to see anything, but I had to. For the first 10 minutes, nothing. Just me walking out of frame, the empty room, the rug half rolled, the floorboard loose. Then, around the 28-minute mark, the camera flickered. Just once. But there was no power surge in the house. I checked the logs later. It flickered again at 28:06. And that's when I saw it. A shadow. Not cast from outside, there was no light on. This was from inside the room. It moved just past the edge of the frame. Tall. Too tall. Not fast, but deliberate. Like it knew it was being watched. The flicker happened again, and in that split second, frame by frame, I saw it turn toward the camera. But there was no face. Just the outline of a figure. A void where features should have been. And then, at 28:12, the footage glitched. Not froze. Not skipped. Glitched. Distorted bars across the screen like you'd see in old VHS tapes. But this was digital. The screen warped. Then silence. No more movement. No more flickers. I watched the rest of the recording. Nothing else happened. But it was enough. Someone or something had been in that room. It had stood right where I sat every night. And it had looked at the camera. And that meant it had looked at me. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Because how do you explain a figure with no face and a missing 4 years of property records? No. I needed more. I needed confirmation. Not just that something was here, but that it had always been here. Because if this thing was waking up now, the question wasn't why. The question was, what had kept it quiet all these years? And what had I done to wake it up? You know how people say your body knows when something's wrong before your mind catches up? I felt that. It was like my chest folded in on itself when I pulled up the last floorboard. There was no concrete slab, just a layer of crumbling dirt. And it smelled, not like rot exactly, but sour, damp, old, like a room that had never seen light or air in decades. I ran my hand along the edge of the crawl space. My fingers touched something sharp. I flinched back, but then I looked closer. It wasn't sharp wood. It was bone. Not an animal's. Not something random. It looked a human. I froze. I wasn't imagining the knocking. I wasn't imagining the dreams. I wasn't imagining the cold that never left. There was someone buried beneath my living room floor. And for the first time since I moved in, I realized I was never alone. I backed up and called the landlord. My voice was shaking. I didn't care how I sounded. I said, "There's something under the floor. I don't know what, but it's not okay. You need to come here." He didn't ask questions. He didn't sound surprised. He just said, "I'll be there in the morning." And he hung up. Not "What did you find?" Not "Are you safe?" Just, "I'll be there." That night I didn't sleep. Couldn't. I sat on the couch, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the opening in the floor like it might start breathing. Every creak in the walls felt like it was inching toward me. And the knocking didn't stop. But this time, it sounded closer. In the early hours, I saw something. A shadow. Just for a second. It moved across the hallway wall, but nothing had passed by. It was shaped like a person. But it wasn't tall. It was hunched, like someone who had been stuck for years. It stopped at the edge of the room, where the floor was torn open. And then it vanished. I couldn't move, couldn't scream, couldn't even cry. I just stared. Because now I knew. Whoever was buried there didn't want company. And I wasn't supposed to be in that house. When the knock came at 6:17 a.m., I was already sitting by the door, eyes wide, skin cold. I hadn't moved all night. Not after the shadow. Not after the knocking got closer. Not after I realized something was watching me from under the floor. It was the landlord, Mr. Keegan. Same stained jeans. Same quiet voice. But his eyes, they didn't look at me. Not once. He stepped inside and walked straight past me. Didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask what I'd found. He walked to the living room, saw the gaping hole in the floorboards, and knelt beside it like he was greeting someone. And then, almost under his breath, he said, "I told you I'd keep you here." I didn't breathe. Couldn't. He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to whatever was buried there. I asked, "What is this? Who's down there?" He turned. For the first time, he looked me in the eyes. But there was no apology. No panic. Just a warning. Don't go digging into what the house keeps. It's not yours to find. And then he dropped something into the crawl space. It was a locket. Old. Rusted. I hadn't seen it before. But the moment it hit the dirt, the house shifted. I felt it. Like the tension in the walls relaxed. Like the thing beneath me had finally been satisfied. He stood up, dusted off his hands, and said, "She wasn't supposed to die here, but she did. And the house made her stay." I asked who, and he just said a name. Lillian. That was it. No last name. No story. No explanation. Just Lillian. And then he told me I had until the end of the week to move out. I never found her in missing persons records. No Lillian who matched the timeline. No one ever reported buried beneath that address. But I know what I saw. I know the way the air changed. I know what the dreams felt like, and how they stopped the night I left. I never slept in that house again. Never stepped back inside. But I still have nightmares. Not about the knocking. Not about the shadow. About the landlord's face, and the way he said her name like he'd known her. Like he still knew her. Like she was watching us. If you're watching this, and you think this couldn't happen to you, I did too. Until I bought a house with a secret it refused to bury. Subscribe to the Veil of Secret for more true stories you were never supposed to hear. Because sometimes the scariest hauntings come from the people still living.